Hello, it's Sean here with the first of some iPhone videos. Now these are all going to be from a Voiceover perspective, which is the screen reader on the iPhone, as you may know, and hopefully I'm going to cover some basics and work our way up to some more complicated things. The organisation of these videos is such that you will be able to pick the bits you want to know about, and we're going to try and cover things in order and a way that means that if you know something already, you can just pick a video about something you want more detail on without necessarily needing to do everything in order. So I'm trying to sort of make a reasonable level of walkthrough whilst also having the ability to pick and choose the bits you need. So this video is about the iPhone screen, nothing practical here, all theory, just going through some details of the iPhone screen. The iPhone screen is multi-touch, so that means it recognises more than one finger at a time. So that's how you can use one or two or three fingers, not just one finger at a time. And it's quite sensitive. By far the most common complaint of a new iPhone user is, oh my gosh, I've touched it, what's happening? Because as soon as you touch the screen, you are interacting with it, and that is perhaps one of the hardest things for a new iPhone user to come to terms with, really. The screen can be used in portrait or landscape orientation. What does that mean? Basically that you can turn it sideways. And if you're sighted, of course, there may be more reason to do this. The only reason I ever turn my phone sideways is to braille onto the screen, which we'll cover in a separate video later on. It can be quite disconcerting if you're holding the phone in your hand and you tilt it. The sensors and the accelerometer inside the device will think you want to change the screen layout. And so if you're holding your phone and it's suddenly saying landscape, portrait, landscape, whenever you move it, that'll be why. It's trying to keep the visual layout concurrent with the way you're holding the device. So that's something else to be aware of while you're learning as well. Apps on the phone often follow a similar layout. Now this isn't always true of all the screens. There are certain screens on the phone that are different, like the lock screen and the home screen. But when you're in an app, you will encounter several similarities, certainly most apps, a lot of apps, not all of them, but a majority. So most apps will have, on the very top of the screen, a status bar. This shows you things like the current time, your battery level, your Wi-Fi and phone signal, and generally speaking is a series of little pictures, little icons on the screen that represent status information about your device. It's always at the top of the screen, and it's always useful as a voiceover user. You can use it for three different reasons, which I will cover in a separate video. An app may have a back button in the top left-hand corner. So let's imagine, for example, that you've opened an email message on your iPhone. The back button in the top left corner will take you back to the list of messages that you came from to open that message. And this is why very often you'll first hear, the very first thing you'll hear when you go into a new screen is the back button, because that's where you land. A lot of apps have a series of tabs along the bottom. This is usually because they've got different sort of views, and you can navigate to different views on the app. So for example, in Google Classroom, there are tabs to look at your stream of what's going on, your classwork, and the people in the class, and those let you flick between different parts of an application. Some apps don't have tabs, some apps don't lend themselves to tabs. The calendar, for example, doesn't have tabs. It does have buttons on the bottom, but they aren't different interfaces. And when I say tab, what I mean is effectively a new window within an app. So just like how on a website you can open windows in new tabs, a tab is effectively a new part of the app you're in. The middle of an app window is taken up by a scrollable content area. So generally speaking, when you're in an app on your iPhone, there is more to that app than fits on one screen. So whether you're on Facebook and you're scrolling through posts, whether you're in messages and you're scrolling through conversation, or whether you're doing almost anything else really, the chances are that the viewable part of the app will be a very small part of the whole. And anybody who's used a braille display is intimately familiar with this concept, of course, because you can only see a small part of any given thing at any given time. And so it is worth knowing that, let's imagine you open up a list of emails again. You may only be able to to see 4 or 5 messages at once, the names of the senders and the subjects and the times they've arrived. And there needs to be a mechanism for scrolling around that content, for moving to more content. And that is done with a variety of gestures and things, which we'll come to in further videos. But remembering that those solid things, those unchanging parts of the application, the status bar, the tabs on the bottom maybe, are always present and don't scroll when you are moving. So it's not the whole screen that moves, it's part of the screen, the part that the developer of the app or the designer of the app has indicated that needs to move. And if you can sort of remember that, you will always be able to touch a part of the screen which isn't moving and get your bearings as well. So that is the screen layout in a nutshell. Usually there's only one app on the screen at a time. On an iPhone, certainly iPads have a side-by-side view where you can view half of one app and half of another. And increasingly common is for apps to have if they show video, a picture-in-picture option now, whereby you can, for example, put a YouTube video on, and you can then come out of the video, and a bit like how you can listen to music in the background, you can watch the video in a corner of your screen. Not overly useful for blind people trying to concentrate on 2 voices at once, but of course if you do listen to music videos or you have other reasons, you can keep them playing while you do other things on your device. So it's rare to have more than one app on the screen at a time, but it does sometimes happen. But in the vast majority of cases, you will have your app on the screen and you'll be able to navigate around it. And if you bear in mind that your app will almost always have a status bar, almost always have a series of buttons or controls that are outside the fluid scrollable part of the screen, and then there will be a section of the app that, generally speaking, is flexible to show more data where needed. That will hopefully give you a good understanding of what's on the screen visually. And as we go through the tutorials here, we will talk through more apps as we come to them, just to give you a flavour of what the screens are like. But hopefully this has been a good start. Next video in the series, we will talk about the home screen and what you can do with a single finger on your iPhone screen.